When a rock legend's brother posted a cryptic message about reunion and peace, fans had no idea what horror had unfolded just hours earlier in a quiet Stockport neighborhood. Gary Mani Mounfield, the man whose basslines made millions move, lay motionless as paramedics desperately tried to save him. But here's what nobody's talking about. The 63-year-old bassist left behind twin boys who'd already buried their mother less than 2 years ago. And the circumstances of his final moments reveal a pattern that has friends whispering about what really happened in those last weeks of his life. Thursday morning started like any other in Heaton Moor, until emergency services received a call that would shake British music to its core. The man who defined the Madchester sound, who'd played to 90,000 screaming fans at Wembley, who'd survived the dangerous streets of 1980s Manchester when 17 of his closest friends didn't make it out alive, collapsed in his own home. Reports say it was a seizure, sudden and violent, giving him no time to call for help or say goodbye. His brother Greg broke the news to the world, but the message carried a weight that went beyond typical celebrity death announcements. He said Manny was now reunited with his beloved wife, and those words opened a door to a tragedy that's been quietly destroying this family for years. Here's where it gets darker. Imelda Mounfield fought bowel cancer for 3 brutal years after her 2020 diagnosis, and when she passed on November 18, 2023, she left Mani alone to raise their 12-year-old twin sons, Gene and George. Sources close to the family say he never recovered from that loss. He put on a brave face, announced a speaking tour, posted excited messages on Instagram about hitting the road one last time. But people who knew him well noticed something different in his eyes. The spark had dimmed. In his last major interview, he'd compared getting Imelda's cancer diagnosis to taking 2 proper Tyson blows to the face, saying that performing at massive stadiums was nothing compared to watching the woman he loved waste away. Those weren't just dramatic words for an interview. Friends say that's exactly how he lived every single day after she died. What makes this even more haunting is the timing of his death, coming almost exactly 2 years to the day after Imelda passed. Some call it coincidence, others wonder if grief physically broke him, and a few insiders quietly suggest he'd been struggling with health issues nobody knew about. The seizure that took his life wasn't necessarily his first, but if there were warning signs, he kept them hidden from everyone except maybe his closest circle. Days before his collapse, he was posting about his upcoming tour with excitement, making jokes about getting too old for the road, promising fans he wouldn't dish dirt on his famous bandmates, but would share his own twisted version of history. Nobody watching those posts would have guessed he had less than a week to live. The real gut punch? Gene and George are now orphans at 12 years old. Not teenagers who can somewhat process loss, not young adults who have support systems built up. 12. They watched their mother deteriorate from cancer, attended her funeral, tried to adjust to life without her, and then their father dropped dead before they even had time to heal from the first trauma. Manny's stepbrother John Barlow didn't mince words when he said the situation was absolutely tragic, emphasizing that 2 young boys now have neither parent. Extended family and friends have surrounded the twins with support, but nothing fills that void. Nothing prepares kids that young to become orphans. Rewind to 1987, when everything was just beginning. Manny joined the Stone Roses right before they exploded onto the British music scene, and his bass playing on Elephant Stone announced the arrival of something special. The following year, he created one of the most recognizable bass lines in rock history on I Wanna Be Adored, those hypnotic opening notes that grab you by the throat and don't let go. Their debut album didn't just chart, it defined an entire movement, going 5 times platinum and reaching number 5 in the UK.
Fool's Gold dropped in 1988 and became an instant classic, with Mani's groove-heavy bass driving the track's irresistible rhythm. One Love followed in 1990, cementing their status as the kings of Manchester, that perfect blend of indie rock and rave culture that took over Manchester and spread worldwide.
But success came with pressure, and by the time they were recording Second Coming at Rockfield Studios in Wales, cracks were showing. The sessions dragged on for 13 months. Tensions ran high between band members, and the creative process became torturous. That's when Mani met Imelda, finding love in the middle of chaos. The album finally dropped in 1994 to mixed reviews, critics noting it lacked the magic of their debut, and by 1996, the Stone Roses called it quits. Mani walked away from the band that made him famous, but he walked toward Imelda, choosing love over rock stardom when most musicians would have made the opposite choice. He didn't stay quiet for long. Primal Scream snatched him up, and he spent the next several years with the Scottish rock legends until 2011. In interviews, he compared the two bands with brutal honesty, saying Primal Scream operated like a democracy while the Stone Roses constantly worried about whether Ian Brown and John Squire approved of everything. He admitted feeling more creative freedom with Primal Scream, appreciating that they could spot nonsense just as quickly as the Stone Roses, but without the ego games. Those comments revealed the dysfunction that had always lurked beneath the Stone Roses' success, the personality conflicts that eventually tore them apart twice.
Then came the twist nobody expected. April 2011, Mani's mother's funeral, and Ian Brown and John Squire ended years of silence by reconciling over her casket. Within months, the Stone Roses announced their reformation, and the music world lost its mind. They scheduled 2 shows at Manchester's Heaton Park for June and July 2012, and 50,000 tickets for each show sold out in minutes. They added more dates, played Coachella in 2013, toured through 2017, giving fans the reunion they dreamed about for 15 years. The crowds went wild, the chemistry seemed genuine, and for a while it looked like they'd conquered their demons. But old wounds don't heal just because you want them to. May 2016 brought their first single in 20 years, All for One, and initially it seemed like they might actually record a proper comeback album. Behind the scenes, though, the same old tensions were bubbling up. Recording sessions fell apart, arguments erupted, and plans for new material got scrapped. Their final show together happened in Glasgow in 2017, and Ian Brown told the crowd something that hits different now. Don't be sad that it's over. Be happy that it happened. Those words were meant to comfort fans, but knowing what came next for Mani, they feel almost prophetic.
Here's something most people don't know. Mani once revealed he became friends with Ian Brown when they teamed up to deal with National Front skinheads who'd been terrorizing their mates in North Manchester. They bonded over standing up to fascists, and that friendship survived decades of music industry drama. He also dropped a bombshell in interviews, admitting that joining the Stone Roses probably saved his life. While he was touring and recording, 17 of his friends back home lost their lives to heroin addiction. Music wasn't just his career, it was literally what kept him alive when so many others around him were dying. That context makes his own sudden death even more cruel. He survived the dangers that killed his friends, only to be taken out by a seizure in his own home. The tributes that flooded in tell you everything about how respected he was. Liam Gallagher, not exactly known for gushing emotions, said he was in total shock and absolutely devastated, calling Mani his hero. Ian Brown kept it simple but powerful, just posting, "Rest in peace, Mani X," with an emotion that words couldn't capture. Happy Mondays singer Rowetta sent love to the boys and family, saying she'd miss him desperately. Echo and the Bunnymen's Ian McCulloch said he was absolutely gutted, describing Mani as someone he loved like a brother. Music journalist John Robb called him a beautiful person and one of the greatest bass players ever. Even Manchester United posted a tribute, honoring him as a Manchester music icon and passionate lifelong Red.
What's striking about these tributes is how many people emphasized his personality over just his musical talent. Sure, he was an incredible bassist, but more than that, he was genuinely kind. Manchester publicist Liam Walsh, who knew him for 40 years, said Mani always greeted everyone with warmth, no matter who they were or what they could do for him. In an industry known for massive egos and fake friendships, Mani stood out as authentic. He never forgot where he came from, never acted like fame made him better than anyone else, and treated roadies with the same respect he showed rock legends. His approach to music was equally humble. In a 2000 Guitar World interview, he talked about how bass drives dance music and complained that hotshot guitar players always try to steal the spotlight in rock, but anyone with real groove knowledge understands how crucial bass is. He learned by ear, joking that if you put sheet music in front of him, he'd be completely lost. That natural instinct for rhythm made his playing feel effortless, like the bass lines were writing themselves through him. When he joined the Stone Roses, he admitted to Bassist magazine that he was still pretty inexperienced, crediting drummer Rennie, John Squire, and Ian Brown for teaching him so much. He said playing with a drummer like Rennie was the best education he could have gotten, and he'd be eternally grateful for those lessons.
Just last month, he appeared on the Raconteurs podcast saying he was in a great space mentally and itching to get back on stage. People close to him say he'd been working through his grief over Imelda's death, trying to stay strong for Jean and George while processing his own pain. The speaking tour announcement seemed like a positive step forward, a way to connect with fans and celebrate his legacy without the physical demands of performing. He was planning to share stories from his 4 decades in music, reflecting on the Madchester scene, the chaos of the Stone Roses, his time with Primal Scream, and all the wild moments in between. Tickets were selling, venues were booked, and everything pointed toward a new chapter. Then Thursday morning happened. Now Jean and George face a future without either parent, surrounded by their father's massive legacy, but missing the actual man. They'll hear "I Want to Be Adored" on the radio and know their dad created those iconic bass lines. They'll see tributes from Liam Gallagher and Ian Brown calling him a hero and legend. They'll grow up knowing he influenced countless musicians and defined an era of British rock. But none of that replaces having him there for their first heartbreak, graduation, or wedding. Imelda organized charity auctions featuring items from David Beckham and Oasis while battling cancer, telling the BBC she didn't want to sit around thinking about illness because it was too consuming. She fought to live, to be present, to give her boys as much time with her as possible. Mani did the same after she died, pushing through grief to be there for Jean and George. Now they're both gone, and those boys are left holding memories and a musical legacy that the whole world shares but can never truly understand the way they do.
The Stone Roses and Primal Scream released a joint statement calling Mani their wonderful brother and the greatest bass player and friend they could have wished for. Those words capture what everyone who knew him felt, but they also mark the end of an era. No more reunion tours, no more surprise collaborations, no more chances for fans to hear that distinctive bass tone live. His paint-splattered Rickenbacker bass sits silent now, a piece of rock history that will never create new magic. The grooves that made Fool's Gold irresistible, the bass lines that anchored the Stone Roses' sound, the musical intuition that made every song he touched better, all of it stopped when his heart did. Gary Mani Mounfield's story isn't just about a talented bassist who played with legendary bands. It's about a kid from Manchester who survived when his friends didn't, who found love during creative chaos, who chose family over fame when it mattered, and who left behind 2 young boys who needed him more than any fan ever could. The music world mourns a legend, but somewhere in Stockport, 2 12-year-olds are trying to figure out how to live in a world that took both their parents before they were old enough to drive. That's the reality behind every tribute post and every article celebrating his legacy. Jean and George lost their whole world. and no amount of 5 times platinum albums or sold-out reunion shows can change that fact.